So it's just having myself to the stage. There we go. I think we're live now. Good. So this is, what day is it? It is Monday again. Comes round so quickly, I think. And it's the 27th of October. So moving towards Halloween. A couple of days' time. So welcome to this week's Chen Chat. So we'll just wait for people to get logged in. Jane's going to do the obligatory sound check to make sure that we can be heard, or I can be heard. It's always handy. We're starting off. Okay, so motivational mindset. Hello from Canada, Naval. Great to see Naval. You're always one of the first on, so thank you for joining. It's much appreciated. And obviously my sound is okay, I'm assuming, which is good. So this week we're going to talk about before we were born. So basically the soul's blueprint and the journey into human form, I guess, human existence, human life, really. So I think this is what we wanted to talk about, which should be good. Okay, Jane's confirmed that she can hear me, which is always nice. So sound check is good and we're ready to go. So this week, talking to Chen this morning, we always go over a kind of list of things that we are interested to talk about and how we're going to talk about them and what we're going to kind of go over, really. And I think what we're going to find interesting, and what you guys hopefully will find interesting from a recipient perspective, really. Obviously, these chats are designed to be helpful to the people that listen. And obviously, we try to cover as many different topics on the spiritual playing field, really, as we can. So this is an interesting one. So we're going to talk about before we actually incarnate into this life that we're all living today. If you're listening to me, in theory, we are alive and therefore we're incarnated. So before we came into this life, what was the kind of journey, really? So in terms of what really happens, I guess, from a spiritual planning perspective, spiritual stages, contracts, karma, I guess divine orchestration, shaping our human experience, really. So we think about, we have an energy outside of the person that we know today. And that energy obviously chooses, or part of that energy chooses as a consciousness to come in to experience this human life. So I wonder what we do think about when we're looking to build the orchestration and the kind of architecture of the life we're having today. So we're going to talk about, our family. We obviously choose, or we're born into a family. Everyone has to be born into a family, or certainly born in, into a group of people. So what does that look like, really? How does that work? How do we pick who the family is going to be, who the people are that are going to be our parents, our mother, our father, generally? Again, we currently effectively need two people, probably not in the future, the way that AI and things are moving forward. But in theory, at some point, obviously there were two people that were involved in our kind of incarnation sequence, really. So we're going to kind of draw on the insights of Chen as we sort of move forward with this podcast. And we're going to unpack how the spirit really, I guess, prepares and chooses and aligns with the people, and then the events that kind of guide our evolution into this life experience on this planet Earth that we're on today. So I think we all probably can realize that as we go through life, we meet people that we like generally, and we meet people that we don't really like. And the people that we do like, as soon as we meet those people and start to connect and talking to them, it feels like we've known them before. We kind of just know, just intuition, just know that we know these people. The people we dovetail in with, we connect with, we can laugh with. And that kind of points to the fact that obviously, because it's the first time that we've met them in this life incarnation, we must have had a past life with that person. We must have been engaged with them at some point in a past life to know them so well. And I think this is what most people will understand, and most people will, as they go through their life, find that person or those people that come into your life that you just know. So for you today listening, this could be your best friends, one of your best friends, could be your wife, could be your husband, could be your partner, could be your significant other person, could be your children, it could be anyone in your circle, really, but people that you just know, from before. And obviously the before has to be really a past life, or certainly from a spiritual perspective. So this is what we're going to talk about today and cover, what really happens before we're born. So we're kind of going to go back in time. And we're going to ask Chen to kind of bring that forward with his conversation. and obviously get him to explain and to share how the spirit plans its experiences before really entering into the physical world in this particular incarnation. So I'm going to say hi to Casey. Good to have you here, Casey. I notice you're always here, which is always nice. Same faces, which means we must be doing something right if you're enjoying the podcast, the topics, things that we cover, which is always handy. And I think Magdalena's here too. Yeah, which will be good. Good to have you here as well. Again, so anyone that wants to ask questions whilst I'm still kind of in more consciousness, I guess. So before Chen comes in, any of your questions, things you want to put in the chat, comments, we can cover and talk about. Obviously, once Chen comes in, he keeps my eyes closed and can't read effectively. So at that point, we kind of lose the ability to ask Chen questions. If you've got questions that you're thinking about or things that are on your mind around this topic before we were born, pop them in the comments and we'll do our best to cover them in any way that we can. I know, again, we've got people watching these podcasts on YouTube and Facebook. So again, welcome to you from both perspectives. Alison's saying that she's here, which is good. Oh, you're new here. Well, it's good to have you. So thanks for joining. Hopefully we'll keep you entertained with some interesting conversation. And again, I normally do a quick chat to start with, which is my kind of version of things, really, just so you understand, Alison. And then we get Chen to come in, so Chen will take over in full trance, and he'll basically run the kind of second part of this conversation. So normally we kind of get two versions of things, or we try and provide two different kind of directions, two different directives, two different opinions. So you've kind of got my version that I understand, and then obviously we've got Chen's opinion and version too, which will be good. Okay, so that's here, but I don't have friends to tag. Okay. Well, it's good that you're here. Obviously, these are all recorded, so Facebook records these. We also put them on our YouTube channel, so they're always there then, that if your friends want to join them or to watch them in catch up. They also go out on our podcast channel. So we've got a podcast channel on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc. So all of these conversations, these Chen Chats on a Monday, go out in various places. So if you don't see them, or you wanted to catch up, or your friends want to catch up, there's plenty of places and links that you can send them to guide them really to the conversations that we're having. So so that should be good. Okay, so Magdalena's asking, what is Chen's understanding of twin flame connections, karmic connections? That's a good question. So we can ask him that. Obviously, today we're trying to cover the concepts of before we come in, really. So again, the twin flame connection and the karmic connection does come into that conversation, which should be interesting. Again, from my perspective, I think twin flame connections, karmic connections kind of falls into the same space. The twin flame concept, I think, being generally understood is that two people that are a twin flame that are both alive at the same time on this particular incarnation probably are part of the same spiritual conscious awareness that have come in to live the life in this particular incarnation and meet each other. And normally those twin flames obviously could be, or twin flames tend to have a very connected experience, whether it be man and woman, two men, two women, whichever way around things tend to be. But you're kind of very connected to a twin flame, but they can also be quite destructive relationships as well as positive ones. So I think twin flames, when they find each other, do have this very difficult journey to kind of travel. And we probably can talk about twin flames on a different podcast as well, because that, I guess, is a whole sort of conversation for itself, really, which will be good. Okay, so just going down here, right to Quantum Starseed. Alison's asking, my question is, are the guides that I have, are they other people's guides too, or just mine? That's a really good question, actually. It's a question I haven't thought about before. I know certainly from our perspective, Chen kind of guides me, or is my primary spirit guide. He also does connect with Jane. In fact, Jane spends longer talking to Chen than me half the time. And I think her guide steps back often and she connects to Chen. So there is a bit of guidance that kind of overlays and overlaps certainly there. So I would say, Alison, to answer your question, I'm pretty sure that your guides probably are other people's guides in different ways too, maybe. So again, in our world, in our mind, we have this kind of protective thing over our guides, that, it's our guide, it's our life, they're kind of here to guide us. But of course, they're not sequential, and they're not tied into the sequential nature of our reality. So they can be doing different things at the same time. And quite often when I speak to Chen and say, obviously you're working with me, obviously you're working with other people, you're clearing other people, his take on that was that he's my primary guide in this particular life, and he's only my primary guide. So he isn't working with other people as a spirit guide. He works with other people as he connects to their energy and clears them and works on them, but he's only guiding myself effectively, and I'm probably connected to Jane. So it's kind of quite a good question. But I would imagine that there's no reason that a spirit guide can't be guiding two people at the same point in time, because they don't have this sequential life to live. They can be in multiple places at the same time. So that would be my kind of opinion on that, really. Okay, so Magdalene's asking, what's the best way to heal last love traumas? I guess if you've been in proper love with someone, you've been really connected to them and you've had that kind of feeling, that emotional connection, then obviously when that relationship ends, for both people, there's a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, a lot of negativity. So I think clearing the energy is the key thing, really. So you could do that in kind of meditation, visualize cords, disconnect cords, talk out to the guides to clear the energy, to disconnect everything, and obviously work through things from that perspective. So that would certainly be one major way that you could start to bring that split energetically apart and do it in a kind of clean way, really. Okay, so we're just going to come back to the soul's incarnation concept that we're talking about, really. So it's kind of a spiritual teaching more than a religious idea, effectively, that obviously before we come into this life, we kind of sit down somewhere as a conscious energy, and we obviously speak to and connect with other conscious awarenesses that are going to be in spirit at the same time, i.e. our friends and family, and we kind of decide almost like I kind of see it like a theatre show, really, that we kind of pick our parts. So I'm going to be Andy, Jane's going to be Jane, my children are going to be Oliver, Brian, Jane's children, etc. So we all kind of pick our part effectively, and kind of how you're going to live and at what point you're going to meet. And then when you meet each other, obviously that's the kind of ignition part of the energy. When you actually meet that person, you think, well, I kind of know you from a past life. And I know that when Jane and I met, we've both been married, both had children, both were divorced. When we met each other, the moment we met and started to talk, that energetic connection was there immediately. It was like, I know you from before, I know your energy. I've never seen you in this life in body, but I know you energetically and who you are. And then we kind of spent all night to just start talking, basically covering all sorts of things. So that energetic energy was there from the very kind of get-go. And that obviously points to the fact that before we came in, we obviously had planned to have these separate lives and have children with other people. And then we were basically going to meet. And effectively the meeting point was the turning on point spiritually too. So not only did we meet each other and have that kind of I know you from a past life, we just clicked energetically, we also had the spiritual turn on. So that was why for certainly for me and for Jane at the same time, really, everything kind of went haywire so quickly, because not only have you met somebody that you really connected with, the whole spiritual world kind of came to greet us at the same time. And neither of us were spiritual at the time. So we started to have all of these crazy experiences because we'd met each other. And I'm pretty sure, I know now really, that was the kind of turn on point spiritually, that when we met, that would be, you're kind of engaged, turned on, your life won't change, it won't go backwards now, we're moving forwards, but with a spiritual life. So I think that the soul's kind of or the spirit pre-incarnation state really is effectively where we are. So it's almost that spirit existence in higher realms as kind of pure conscious awareness connected to source. And then we kind of got that kind of reflection of, let's look at what we did in past lives, in other previous incarnations. Let's look at the lessons that we learned, or maybe we didn't learn, probably be more important, I guess. Lessons that we learned, we did learn. Things that we didn't learn, I guess we get to repeat really in the next incarnation. And then, of course, we know that everything is vibration and frequency. So the vibrational alignment that kind of determines the readiness for the next incarnation is a key part of the conversation, because we know that everything is frequency. We know that we all vibrate at different frequencies. So if we're going to meet somebody in this life, we're going to meet someone probably on our frequency. So whatever our frequency of vibration is who we attract into our life. And that person, if they're vibrating at the same frequency, we're going to kind of connect with and align with. Whereas obviously people that we meet generally when we're at work or we're out and about or just doing our normal things, if they're not really in our sphere and they're not vibrating at the same frequency as us, they're just going to come into our life and kind of disappear out again, really. So the frequency of vibration is kind of a key part of the incarnation conversation, I think, certainly from my perspective, really. Okay, so from that perspective, I guess, how a spirit kind of communicates with the guides. We know we have councils, spiritual councils, we have spiritual mentors. So we've got spirit guides and kind of councils and mentors around us. So again, you can imagine that before we come into this life, there's going to be some conversations around, this is the things I need to learn. These are the things I probably got wrong last time. I get to have another go at this time. And then we kind of work out the team of people that we're likely to mix with in this life. So I'm going to meet you when we're 32 years old. We'll both be divorced. We'll both have children. And then we're going to basically get together, potentially get married. And obviously we'll try and resolve the things that obviously weren't resolved in the last life between us. And also what lessons do we both want to learn and go through as we start this new relationship. So you can imagine there's a lot of planning probably going on. And of course the spirit guide's job, as we know, is to basically guide us along the path that we chose. So we've kind of got this blueprint in front of us, kind of almost like a worksheet, I guess, that the spirit guide has. And there are certain key things on that sheet. You know, I want to experience this. I want to get married. I'm going to get divorced. I'm going to have children. You know, I might lose parents. I might lose people close to me. So it's going to be this kind of map of our life and the things that we get to experience, or we want to experience. And the spirit guide's job is to take us through life and guide us into positions to meet people, be in certain places at certain times so that we get to experience those things. And of course, those things aren't always positive. So we could be in accidents. We could find that we do crazy things and end up with problems. I know in my own life, I did some crazy things when I was younger, as you do, on sort of bikes, ended up in hospital, broken legs, all sorts of things. And you look back and you think they were crazy things to do. But of course, they were obviously on the path because they were big things that basically you took forward for the rest of your life. So when you've been involved in accidents, especially quite bad ones, obviously they were things that were probably pre-chosen by you. They're in your path, and you'll learn a lot going through that kind of recovery process, or the process that maybe you don't get yourself back to full health and you have to live in a way that isn't what you wanted. So again, there's a whole lot of kind of life plans, I think, would be my kind of opinion, really, and sort of energetic map of lessons, experiences, and also the opportunities. And we know that not everything is predestined. Chen's told me lots of times that not everything's predestined. Some things, just happen, just randomly happen. But a lot of things are predestined again. So the big things, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have children, I'm going to be in a car crash that causes me problems, my parents are going to pass, maybe when I'm younger, so I get to experience more challenge effectively. So a lot of the major life themes are kind of growth points, I guess, as I see them, challenges really for us to kind of overcome. And certainly relationships, when we all get into relationships with someone else generally as a kind of significant partner, and then relationships when you're younger fall apart quite quickly and quite easily generally as people move from one person to another and people don't align with each other. So quite often you find that every time a relationship finishes or ends, that's going to be trauma for someone. The one that's leaving has chosen to move forward and move on, but the one that's being left is being left. And of course, they're going to feel all of the emotions of being kind of left, not particularly nurtured, and maybe not listened to. They're going to feel angry, probably undermine the confidence, certainly to a certain degree. So relationships are a great way, I think, really from a spiritual perspective, to learn a lot about ourselves, and it's how we kind of grow spiritually along that life path. And then if we talk about things like contracts, so agreements made between spirits, or souls, whichever way you look at it, to assist one another in growth. So we all kind of know or have met someone generally in our life that comes along seemingly just at the right time. So, I know for me, my kind of life started to fall apart when sort of divorce was happening and that kind of stuff, and things were a bit difficult. And then one of my friends said, why don't you come to a meditation evening? You're a bit stressed, you've got plenty of problems to deal with, why don't you come and just meditate? And I remember thinking, well, kind of not for me. I was really into my mountain biking and sports, and I thought sitting in a room meditating is not going to do much for me, really. But I kind of got talked into going, and it was probably the life-changing, it was a life-changing part of my life, really. Joining that meditation group kind of opened my eyes. I felt different afterwards. And I remember Rob, my mate, who kind of dragged me along. So I knew this would change you. So for me, that was a kind of really quite pivotal moment, that he was there for me at the exact right time and didn't really give in. So it was kind of his contract, I guess, to drag me into the kind of meditation concept and get me to experience that. And then I sort of spent the night at his house with a bit of a laugh and talked about it, and I started to then get interested in the spiritual things that were going on. But certainly from a contract perspective, think about your life, who you've met, who's in your life today, and people that have been very significant in kind of changing your path. And quite often, people are encouraging us to do things or go places or try things, and there's always a reason not to do it generally. But if you do it, and you do find yourself being dragged into something that you didn't plan to do, sometimes it's a kind of pivotal moment in our life, and it's kind of life-changing as well, which of course is the key, really. So we're talking about, I guess, the role of free will against or with or versus divine timing. What is divine timing? We know that we've got free will. We can make choices. We know that people come into our lives at significant times, and those people can have a very significant part to play in our life choices and our guidance. And of course, our spirit guides are working behind the scenes generally feverishly to make sure that we arrive somewhere at the right time to be able to kind of have that experience that we've kind of pre-written down for ourselves before we came in. And this is the key thing, really. So if we look at families, before we come into this life, we kind of potentially pre-choose our family, not really for comfort, generally not for fun, but for our kind of spiritual evolution. So think about your family. There'll be people in your family that you like, people that you don't like, people that you get on with, people that you don't get on with, especially siblings. Think about brothers and sisters, people that have been difficult or you've had difficult experiences with. The sibling relationship is very kind of great learning opportunity, more than likely, because you're both going to be fighting for the sort of admiration and attention of your parents. And of course, two siblings are going to continually be effectively fighting to be top of the tree. There's a lot of kind of energy between siblings, brothers and sisters, or sisters and sisters, or brothers and brothers, whichever way around. A sibling is going to be a rival to you most of your life. And then as you get older and you move into adulthood, do those siblings become best of friends? Do you kind of connect and you stay walking through your life with your sibling, which again would have been pre-chosen before you came in? Or do you go different ways? Maybe your sibling was like a teaching or learning opportunity, but not someone you want in your life. And we always say, don't we, that from a spiritual perspective, we kind of choose our friends, but we don't really choose our family. So our friends are chosen by us to be our friends, but family, we have probably chosen them before we come into this incarnation, but obviously we've chosen them because of the evolution aspect and the opportunities that we get to kind of evolve ourselves, more than a family that are likely to be fun and positive, really. So it's that kind of karmic balance that occurs, I guess, through those family dynamics. And family dynamics for everyone, I don't know anyone that has a particularly fantastic family dynamic. Most people that we know are always having family problems. We have our sort of fair share, as everyone else does, of kind of dramas that go on. And of course, the bigger the family you've got, the more siblings are in your family, the more aunties, uncles, therefore the bigger the dramas, because of course when you put people together, generally you tend to get chaos and drama. And if we look at it from a spiritual perspective, especially if they're not sovereign, if we've got negative influence playing into family dynamics, then the negative aspect will create chaos, will create drama continually. And that again is part of our challenge, to learn to control the energy of the family, keeping people protected, keeping people in a safe space energetically, spiritually, obviously makes a big difference to the way that family dynamics are going to play out. Which kind of brings us into the karma conversation, I guess, really. So karma's not really a punishment per se. It's more energy seeking to kind of resolve itself, I think, and understand itself, is my sort of understanding from that. And again, when we come in, we're coming into a karmic loop which is an opportunity then for awareness and kind of liberation to a certain degree. So things we did to someone in the past life, we might get then done to ourselves. And we kind of see this, don't we, with, if you think about, again, from a family perspective, the karma conversation does kind of work. If you think about it, that if in a past life, you caused someone a lot of pain, maybe took their life, maybe did some very bad things to a person in a past life, then in this life you play different roles, and maybe that person then does those things to you. Maybe that's the person that you're in a relationship with that kind of leaves you for somebody else, leaves you hurt, upset, sort of traumatized, feeling really kind of down on your luck. But that would be quite a good karmic lesson if you look at it from a karmic perspective, really. So, Chen said before, I think karma's not really a debt, effectively. It's more of a memory kind of waiting to return back to balance. So there is this equalization that happens between people, and certainly for people that are in abusive relationships or relationships that are problematic, then we have to think about the karma concept. Did you control that person before in a past life? Are they doing to you now what you did to them? Is that the learning opportunity? Is that the kind of that energy seeking to kind of resolve itself and balance, basically? So karma's quite an interesting conversation when we talk about it from before we come into this life. What karma are we bringing in or coming in with? Who are we going to meet? How are we going to have those kind of relationships and understandings, really? And then I guess we obviously overlay that with free will and the concept of like parallel possibilities, really. So every decision we make shifts our timelines, and of course that then changes our vibrational outcomes. So if we think about decisions and don't just rush into things, and we look at what that decision means, how we kind of align with a decision, then we know that every decision is like a kind of block of cards falling down together, or a block of dominoes. As one drops, another one drops, and so another one drops. So we know that a decision today is going to have a knock-on effect. And we can kind of think about that from a health perspective. We know that if we smoke when we're in our 20s, by the time we get to 50, 60, we're probably going to have smoking-related problems. If we overeat in our 20s, by the time we get to 50, 60, we're probably going to have eating disorders and problems. So we know that every decision is a timeline shift, and it has an outcome that we're going to kind of see in the future, really. So I always tend to think the choices we're making today align us with what's going to be in our path in the future. And of course, that obviously plays into the concepts of this kind of soul architecture or spiritual architecture that we built before we chose to come in. So I guess the concept of soul flexibility is the conversation too, really. So life paths that kind of adjust dynamically based with our growth. So as we start to take the right paths, make the right decisions, work with boundaries, speak our truth, try and hold our integrity, which again Chen talks about all the time. Your integrity is the most important part of your spirit, really. And when you give away your integrity or you don't speak your truth, you're only damaging yourself, effectively. So again, learning these key points is something that if we taught our children from 4 or 5 years old, when they can kind of understand things, that you have integrity, you speak your truth, you think about boundaries. By the time children become sort of teenagers, if they were actually working really well on their spiritual path, they would be working from a very high vibration, holding their truth, holding their integrity, keeping boundaries. And then we talk about like service to self as opposed to service to others initially. So if you look after yourself and you manage yourself first, then you have the energy and the understanding to help other people. But if you're continually in service to everybody else around you, your family, your friends, you don't have the time to look after yourself, and therefore you're not moving forward spiritually particularly well, because again, you're being kind of led by events, by chaos, by other things, as opposed to your choices. So again, these are quite kind of key and core understandings, really, of the spiritual path, sort of in my opinion. So I guess it's the importance of staying aligned, really, with your intuition and higher guidance to stay on the path, the higher path that you picked before you came in, the path that leads you into sort of spiritual evolvement and evolution. So it's trying to keep yourself aligned with your own intuition. We know when we do the wrong things. We know when we've made bad decisions. We generally know it's a bad decision before we've even seen the outcome. So trying to align ourselves with our higher self, higher intuition, higher guidance, again, it is a very kind of integral part of the spiritual path, really. So when we think about guides, so how do our spirit guides, ancestors, and our kind of higher self, how do those things steer us through? Well, they use signs, dreams, intuition. So we all know that when we're putting a thought out for guidance, I know from my perspective, I talk to Chen, who's my guide, I talk to him every day, so he is my guide. So if I've got a decision to make, generally I cheat really and ask him. 9 times out of 10, he'll give me his opinion that, as he says, is not always the right opinion, but generally it's a pretty good opinion. So that's my kind of starting point, is to go to spiritual guidance for key decisions, really. But then if we put a thought out, if you can't talk to your guides or you're on that spiritual development path, you can put a thought out to your guides to give you the answer. What should I do in this situation? Give me some steer, give me some guidance. And they'll do that through signs. You might see signs when you're out driving or out walking around, or in your dream state. They'll use dreams to give you the answers. So again, asking and just thinking about these things and just starting to think about the reception so that you can receive the answer. Because we are, intuitive beings spiritually. We just override generally the intuition with the kind of formal conscious part of us that's been programmed to think that our mind is in control. But generally our mind isn't really in control. So it's the intuition we need to be kind of working with. And that's what I try and do on a regular basis when things happen in our lives, the same as everybody else's. Before I jump into anything, I normally stop. I don't reply to emails very quickly. So when there's things going on, generally you read an email as an example, someone's saying something that you don't agree with. So you get that kind of rush of emotion and you want to kind of put your opinion over, or you want to reply. I tend to basically just mark it unread, leave it for a day. So just think about it for a day, and I come back to it next day in a completely different state of mind, non-emotionally. I read that email again and think, okay, so someone wants a reply or an answer or a question or, whatever it happens to be. But again, generally, if you put some time between the initial way that you read something, let your intuition come in, let some time pass, generally the answer that you then give is a positive one, and it's a non-emotional one, because of course emotions are I think we are kind of our Achilles heel. We're all emotional beings. I always laugh with Jane because obviously I'm male, Jane's female. So we always say, men are less emotional than women generally, which is probably the case most of the time. But men still have emotions. Generally, men still can get wound up and still get annoyed about things. So again, I always think when the emotions coming up is the time not to do anything. So if you're feeling emotional, somebody's annoyed you or said something to you, the kind of desire to fight back quickly generally is what then escalates into a problem. But if we just sit back, allow our intuition to kick in and a bit of time to kick in, the emotions disappeared by then. Because again, if you put time into something, the emotions dissolved, then you can come back to it kind of collectively and consciously in a positive way and actually look at a situation, a problem, an email, whatever it happens to be, and you reflect on it in a very different way, and therefore you respond in a different way, and that changes the path effectively, of course, because rather than getting into some kind of difficult negative conversation or argument, you've turned it into a positive thing. You've thought about it, you've used your intuition to look at all sides of the conversation, the email, the problem, the question, and then by not reacting quickly, you give yourself a bit of breathing space and time to do it in a more positive way. So I think that's the way that I try and do things in my life. Not that it always works. There's always somebody that can annoy you. Or you've put a lot of time into something and somebody comes along and undoes it potentially. But, that is part of our life, and that's part of our choices, really. So I think it's life, the way I see it is what life nudges. Life nudges us back onto our intended course. And that is the job of the spirit guide, of course. So if you're supposed to be in a relationship with someone or the relationship isn't right for you, you're going to be having those intuitive thoughts that something's wrong. You need to get back to a point of boundaries, or you need to try and equalize the energy between two people. And if that's not working, your guides are going to be there nudging you continually. Your intuition's going to be nudging you. Your higher self is probably sat behind, also available. So you could go into meditation and sort of put a proposition of a question from a higher self perspective and see how that kind of steers your thought process really in your guidance. There's lots of ways that we can be guided spiritually without actually having to do the hard work. I think the hard work comes when we use our mind, because that way we're not connecting to spirit, we're not connecting to ancestors, higher self. We're just basically using our kind of programmed formal mind that's happened from school to make decisions and do things without really any kind of positive overseeing type of an energy from a spiritual perspective, really. Okay, so my reflection really on this, I guess, is that, life is kind of this miracle that we've pre-chosen. Most of it's been pre-chosen by ourselves, certainly the people in our lives, our families and friends. And it's kind of like divine orchestration happening, really. So turn my phone off a sec. Okay, put that on silent. So I guess we need to look at our own lives. So you guys that are listening, just have a think for a moment about your life, the people that are in your life, the people you like in your life are probably chosen by you. The people that are probably in your life that you don't like probably weren't chosen by you, or they may have been chosen by you to be those people that push you and cause you challenge, really. But that is an opportunity of growth spiritually. So again, some of those people are probably put by you in your life to be there, to be the problem person that you need to learn how to manage, deal with, or sometimes to cut out of our lives. Because, of course, not everyone should be in our life. And I think if you look at most families have a person or a few people that are complete chaos, and they cause chaos for everybody. So they're this little kind of hurricane in a family structure. And if you can cut them out of the family structure, then the chaos disappears, the hurricane kind of disappears. So sometimes these people are there to provide the challenge and also to provide the opportunity, really, for change. So I think from my perspective, really, it's kind of encouraging you guys to think about challenges, really, as you're kind of you chose these opportunities for your own spiritual evolution. So kind of rather than see it as a bad thing, try and turn it on its head and see it as a really good thing. And also, I think one of the things I always laugh about myself is that we didn't really come here to this incarnation, to planet Earth, to be perfect. It's like we came here to remember, really, sort of who we are and to be part of the process and to be here to do things. And I guess we can find those answers when we do meditation, or if you're into kind of journaling, that type of thing. Those types of things can actually give you answers to the why am I here, what am I here to do. And I know for me, most of my life, younger life, there was no real I didn't really have a preset reason to be here per se. But eventually I got onto my spiritual path, and as that path started to open, I kind of realised that because I'd had some interesting experiences with the negative side, I wanted to then dedicate the rest of my life to basically fronting the negative side and pushing it back into place so that other people didn't have to go through and have some of the experiences that I had. So that kind of was, a very kind of orchestrated, pivotal point in my own life when I actually realised, why am I here? I know I'm here now, and now I'm on the path. Everything falls into line, and this is kind of where you guys can do the same. Just have a quick think about your path. Why are you here? What do you think you're here to do? And again, we're not here to make money. We're not here to buy things, material stuff. All those things are just distraction. So we're all here for a spiritual reason. We're all here to do things to kind of probably grow ourselves spiritually, and also work with other people. We're working for the planet effectively. So if we look at the key things and take away all the rubbish, we're not here to look at clothing, fashion, all that stuff is all just a huge distraction, really. But helping other people, working with other people, helping the planet change its own evolution, evolving our species, moving humanity forward, are all the kind of key topics that you could think of that actually have some value. All of the other stuff is just dross generally, but it's clever dross because, of course, it's effectively shiny things that people get to see. And of course, in the SRA world, we tend to call the shiny things the rabbit holes that people disappear down and don't kind of come up from effectively. Okay, so I'm just going to go over to the chat again a second. So I've got multiple windows open here just to see if I've missed questions. Okay, it's good to see Kate's here. Thanks for joining, Kate, which is good. I'm glad you're enjoying the chat, which is always nice to hear. Okay, Magdalena saying 2 people recently wanted to reconnect after 7 years and 5 years. what does it mean? What's the purpose of that? Well, I guess it depends who they are, Magdalena, really. If you see them as positive people that are here to kind of work with you spiritually on your sort of spiritual growth and help move you forward, or people from the past that were, that you've had relationships with, it depends what the kind of dynamics are, I guess, really. But effectively, it just depends whether you feel they're good for you, or are they here to distract you, to create a bit of chaos in your life and take you off your path. And I've seen this so many times now in the spiritual world, where some of my quite close friends that were on a spiritual path, that were really positive, moving forward really well, positively, the negative side presents them with people in their path that distract them, take them off in a negative way, really, and literally take them off their spiritual path. So I've known of people that were very, very good sort of spiritual mediums, doing a lot of positive work from a spiritual perspective, that ended up kind of being distracted by other people in their life, and then relationships, marriages fall apart, and they kind of go off down a different path, and then they lose themselves on that path, and they never get back onto the spiritual path. And it's almost like that was a spiritual warrior that was literally taken out of the field, taken out of the game. And I think it happens so much. There's so many of us that probably get our cards marked when we're pretty early on, and then we have these narcissistic people that are kind of assigned to us, or they're put into our path, is the way that I see things now. And their job is to come into your path, to create a little chaos, to basically take you off of your spiritual path so that you don't pop out. There's one of those kind of spiritual warriors on the battlefield. Effectively, you went off down a kind of shiny rabbit hole, and you don't pop up again. So again, that's kind of how I sort of live my life. That's how I see things. That I'm always aware that the negative side is always chomping at the bit to mark the cards of the best and good people, and it will try and take you sideways if they can. And that generally means bringing people into your life that are going to steer you in a direction that you wouldn't otherwise go. So that would be my answer, Magdalena, really. I mean, you'll know intuitively if these people are good or not so good, and you'll know if they're going to take you in a positive direction by having a relationship, friendship with them, or are they going to steer you in a negative direction. And if you know that they're chaos, then the best thing to do is to turn around and run away as fast as possible, really, in the nicest way. That would be my take. Okay. So Allison's just saying that she has a monk as a guide. His name is Keen. Quite a cool name. It's almost like Chen, yeah. It's Chen, a monk. Chen's not a monk, or hasn't been a monk. He just presents as a kind of, as he says, a humble Chinese farmer. I think it's not really true, particularly. He did have a life as Chen, as a kind of humble Chinese farmer, but because of the things that we do and the way that he works and the things that we work on, and certainly from an SRA perspective, then obviously he's doing a lot of work that would not be particularly normal for a humble Chinese farmer. So I think that's the kind of disguise that he's choosing to present with, really, in this particular life. And I think Magdalena's just replying with, okay, one's arrogant, narcissistic, the other's positive. Yeah, so I guess, yeah. So the arrogant, narcissistic one isn't going to bring anything into your life that's positive. So maybe kind of push that invitation to one side. But if the other one's positive, then you could obviously focus on reconnecting with the positive people. And I guess that is the kind of journey, really. Okay, so let's get Chen in for a quick chat, see what we have to say about the concept of what happens before we were born, how we make decisions, the way we come in, what do we do, who do we meet, all of these kind of interesting conversations that we all think about, really. But again, different people have different opinions, different ideas on things. So it's just interesting to see, really. Just going to set my phone a second. Okay, so let's set the timer. Okay, so let's just hand over to Chen, and I'll catch you folks in about 20 minutes or 25 minutes or something. Good day to you all. It's my pleasure again to be able to have the audience for another week. So welcome to this week's Chen Chat, as we call it, or certainly the conversation of. And when young Andrew spoke to myself this morning, and of course young Jane too, then we decided what sort of topics we talked about, the concept of which topics would be interesting. And one of the things that we thought collectively would be quite interesting is what's really happening. So when you're in your play, as young Andrew says, your theatre act as yourself, you've got your name, you've got the picture that you see, or the people in your life, and the personality that you see in the mirror every morning, which of course we know isn't really real. Everything effectively is a theatre act. It is part of a show. You perceive it to be real because of course you're engaged in the theatre act. So if you look at actors in a theatre, they all have to play a part, and that part makes up and orchestrates the show. And the audience sit outside of the theatre. They sit at the front generally. The curtain goes back, and then you watch a play. And of course, each person in that play, in that theatre show, has their role. So they have the things they have to do. And of course, the play or the theatre movement has a journey, it has a story. So everyone's playing a part that orchestrates and creates a story. And of course, different people do different things as part of this story. So this is you, this is how you live your life. You were a spiritual, conscious vibration with no physical body when you were on my side in spirit, as we call it. Some people call it heaven, some people call it spirit. Lots of different words, depending upon your understanding from a religious perspective, or your upbringing, or your parents' understanding. So we all agree that there's a place that we can call heaven, spirit. The other side, all sorts of different names, but it's a frequency, basically. So I, Chen, exist in a frequency of vibration. And in that frequency band that my energy is in, the person that you know, the one that incarnated into a life on this planet, you have this collective conscious awareness. So you effectively, the same mind that you have today, the same thought process, the same things that go through your mind. The brain basically isn't creating those things. That conscious awareness is a spiritual collective understanding and vibration. The brain is just the physical part that makes the body work and do things, but the actual intelligence that you have in you is your spirit, and that of course is the part that we know that lives on after death. And therefore before death, that same part, that same intelligent conscious awareness is in that vibration that we call spirit. So imagine yourself sat in a room, and you're sat in a meeting, and you've got effectively all of your family and friends that you have today in this room. We're all sat drinking coffee and talking, and one of you says, well, I'm going to go down to planet Earth, and I didn't learn these things in my past life. Let's get the board open. So let's go up to the chalkboard, and they write down the things that they didn't learn in the last time they had an incarnation. So I didn't learn jealousy. I didn't learn how to provide for my family. I didn't really understand responsibility. So we put all of these key things on the board. And then someone says, okay, so who are you going to be? It's like, wow, I think I'd like to be called Fred. Okay, Fred. So you're going to go down. You're going to have this life. These are the key points that you want to learn that you didn't learn last time. Again, so we look at that as the kind of core part of the life choice, really, that you have. And then we say, well, who was in your last life? So you look around the table and say, well, you were, and you were, and you were. And what roles did we play? Well, I was your brother, or I was your sister, or I was your parent, your mum, your father, your uncle. So again, everyone's looking at the roles that they've played as part of soul groups generally in past lives. And we tend to stick to soul groups. So lots of people on the planet you've never really connected with, you've never actually energetically been with, seen, had any type of connection with, but your soul group, which is a bigger, wider group of people, generally you've been in past lives with. And of course, these are the people that you're going to be in your connected architecture today. So people in your family, people you work with, people that are close to you, people you're in relationships with, are all going to be people that you've been generally in other lives with, in the greater sense, effectively. So once you've decided on the key things that you'd like to learn, the opportunities for growth, so then you'd say, okay, well, so I'm going to be Fred, and then I'd like you to be my brother or my sister, whichever part you're going to play. And then what we could do, you could teach me If you take everything off me and you control me because you would be the older sibling, then I'd get the opportunity to learn about jealousy. I'd be jealous that you have everything and you take it all from me and I have nothing. I get the opportunity to learn responsibility, that I don't get to have anything. And again, everything is taken from me and controlled. So you can imagine two people in a boardroom that are discussing the concepts of, if you play this role, how that will affect me and how will I deal with that? Will we get into fights? Yes, of course we will. We'll get into fights. Will they be aggressive fights? Yes, they will. They need to be aggressive. You need to feel pain. Pain is a good learning opportunity. It's how humans learn, through pain. It's how children used to be taught in the old days. You would instruct or incur pain on children. You might smack their bottoms or something when they were naughty, and the pain was the learning tool of choice. Things have obviously moved on and changed generally, but in different parts of the world, pain is still one of the teaching options, effectively. So you can imagine having this conversation. So you write down the things you want to learn, and then you find the people in your direct circle that you're going to be either alive before you come in or will grow up as part of your extended family, and then how they do things and how those things will overlay into your life. And therefore, that's the opportunities you get. So if we look at people that are abused, whether that be physically, sexually, or emotionally, those people will definitely have been in your life. Anyone that's been through that sort of abuse in this life today, those people that did those things to you, the perpetrator, more or less you can guarantee would have been in your previous lives. And if we look at the karmic connections that young Andrew talked about earlier, probably the opposite way around. So you probably did the same things in a previous life to the person that today is the perpetrator in your life. So when you look at things that way, changes the outlook completely. And that person that does the bad things to you in this life had those things done to them by you in the past life. So you would see it very differently. And also, of course, when things have been done to someone by another person to equalize karma, effectively, quite often the person doing the nasty tasks, they can occur other karma themselves. So if you're treating someone very badly or controlling someone, manipulating them, doing bad things to them, you do pick up a certain level of negative residue and karma for doing that and treating someone that way. But of course, that might have been the agreement between the pair of you at the onslaught. So that person in your life, let's say it's your father that's physically abusing you in this life, if you'd done the same in a past life, there could be equalization from a karmic perspective happening energetically. So the time that your father dies in this life, effectively that energy has been equalized and cleared. But if that wasn't the case, and your father was abusing you physically in this life, but there was no karmic retribution happening, then he would be picking up karma for the next life. So he would be doing you a big duty to treat you badly and physically abuse you in this life, such that you got to experience that, and he would then pick up the karmic retribution in his next life. So you can see he's doing you a service. You wouldn't see it in this life. You wouldn't feel it in this life in that way. But basically, there is service happening in different ways. So look at your life experience today. Think about the people that are in your life, that are around you, the things that they've done to you, and how you reacted to those things. And just have a think about, from an intuitive perspective, does it feel like that was concluded? So when relationships end, someone's cheated on someone else. You probably cheated on them again in a past life, more than likely, or certainly there would have been that type of energy in your configuration. So you may have dominated people, cheated on them in other lives, done negative things in that way, and then you get to experience the emotions of how that feels when someone treats you like it. When you're head over heels in love with someone and you realize that they've been having an affair, they've been doing things behind your back, the emotions and the feelings are traumatic and very negative for you to process and understand. But of course, if it's something that you did before, this is the equalization from an energetic perspective. So again, not everything is as it seems. You're only looking at this particular episode of the play, but there are multiple episodes. And if you go back in past life, and this, of course, is why past life meditations can be so powerful, because you can look at something that's happened to you in this life, go back to a past life and ask your guides to show you, I've been physically abused by my father in this life. Let's do a past life meditation and go back and ask your guides, show me a past life that I was with him in whatever configuration that was and what was happening. And you might find in that past life you were doing terrible things to him. And this is the equalization energetically. So when you grow up and become an adult and he can no longer physically abuse you, that's the energy cleansed and cleared and neutralized. So it's equalization of energy. So effectively he then passes. You continue in your life, for the rest of your life in this incarnation, that energy has been cleared from your field, it's been equalized. There may still be trauma, there may still be pain, there may still be negative feelings towards him, but only because you don't know how to clear the energy. If you clear the energy and you acknowledge that you did do things to him in a past life and he's done the same to you, potentially in this life, that energy is now equalized and cleared. Let's pull it from your field. You'll feel better. All of that negativity, hurt, anger, pain is all released and cleared. And this is what everything is about, is that most people don't understand energy and how it sits in your field, and it can be cleared and it can be removed. And your guides can see it because it's a vibration. When you have pain and trauma from an experience in this life, that pain and trauma has its frequency. It sits in your field. We, as the spiritual team, can view that. We can see the frequency. We can see the pain, the trauma, the hurt, the upset, the things that have happened. And that frequency can be cleared from your field. And of course, if it's removed from your field, so the emotions that were connected to those experiences are also cleared and removed. So spiritually clearing yourself is so positive, and it's such a positive way to move forward. And of course, it can be done by yourself. If you're connecting with your guides, you're using meditation, you're employing spiritual protection, you're doing some very simple things, you can be continually clearing, pulling out all of these negative traumas, emotions, and feelings from your own field, and you will change. Because if you take a low frequency of trauma and pain, let's take that frequency out, remove it from the field, then your vibration comes up. As your vibration comes up, you vibrate at a different frequency. Now, if you continue to remove the pain and the trauma, your frequency continues to keep moving up. Then, of course, you attract new experiences and new people, of course, into your life, because everything is magnetism. So whatever frequency you have is the frequency you will attract other people. So this is how you change partners, change relationships, and change people. You change your frequency, which of course is the key part of the teaching and the learning. And it's very simple to do. So again, just by raising your frequency, you move out and away from chaos, from negativity, and you move into these higher frequencies. And at the higher frequencies, there are more positive energies for you to connect with spiritually. And of course, you connect to more positive people, which is the whole point, really, of the teaching, of the understanding, and of the life. So for all of you that are living in chaos, or families that have chaos or problems, you're all living in low frequency, and you need to move yourself out of that frequency band to experience something different. So as they say, if you don't change anything, nothing will change. And people go through their whole life not changing their frequency, and therefore they live in complete chaos for their whole life. They take their last breath and they basically learn nothing to a certain degree. They don't really evolve spiritually. For you to evolve spiritually, you have to be tested. You have to connect to your intuition. You have to work with spiritual teachers and other people that understand the dynamics of how the spiritual world and the spiritual vibration works, which is very, very simple. And then your life changes. So think about your life today. Look at your friends, your family, people that are having problems, people that continually have problems every week. It's not coincidence. There is no such thing from our perspective as coincidence. It's frequency matching. If your frequency is low, you pull in, you connect to negative energies and entities too, and they create chaos in your life. If you clear your field, your vibration comes up, you move into new, higher frequencies, the negative aspect leaves you alone. And then you start to experience new things, more positive things. You can become more financially aware, more financially abundant, because you don't have this negative layer continually draining you energetically. So think about your money, your finance. Money is energy, of course. It's what you accumulate. You accumulate energy to buy your food, to pay for your house, to pay for your lodgings, etc. Everything is energy. You see it as money, but it's not money. The money is invalid, has no value at all. A $10 note has no value. It's just a piece of paper. It's only given value by the system that you exist in, but it has energy. So again, if you earn $10 and you spend 11, you're basically $1 behind. You owe $1. And of course, the universe will take it off you in different ways. So everything is this coordinated, sensible configuration of balance, but it's frequency balance. And this is what this is all about. You're choosing the life that you're having, the people that are around you, to give you the opportunity to learn a lot of lessons in a very short space of time. So those of you that have had some terrible experiences in your childhood or in your younger days, when you weren't in control, you couldn't make decisions, you weren't an adult, or you weren't in a space to control yourself even, responsibilities and choices, things were being done to you that were negative. These were all essential learning opportunities that were given to you by other people around you. But there's an awful lot of karma playing out in those early days. Then as you move into adulthood, so you now control yourself. You take responsibility, you make responsibility, and you make responsible choices based upon yourself. And obviously learning about your spiritual evolvement is part of your spiritual development, because the two things come together. You can't evolve spiritually if you don't develop spiritually. So you have to develop yourself. And development comes through thought, through process, through understanding, through learning, through working and teaching, connecting to people. So again, if you want to be very wealthy, if you look at the wealthy people of the world, they don't mix with the poor people. They mix with the wealthy people, because they know if they mix with people wealthier than them, some of that teaching, understanding, learning rubs off, and so they earn more money. They don't mix with people that have nothing, because the people that have nothing, living in poverty, or have low energy, low vibration, or just life circumstances. Of course, if you're born into a very poor country, you're unlikely to be able to become anything or have much wealth. So your experience is going to be impoverished and difficult, but that, of course, is a life choice too. But again, wealthy, rich people know that if they spend time with people like themselves, that energy is where the abundance is. Obviously, this is a generalized conversation, and we're not talking about people that have extreme wealth through control and other divisive means, but generally, people that are spiritual have nothing, because, of course, you have a life, you haven't learnt to control your energy, you become spiritual through generally trauma, pain, difficult experiences, and then you get the opportunity to start at the bottom of that ladder. You start, most people that are spiritual, talk to them, they'll be 30. In their 30s is the classic point in time, because 0 to 30, make choices, have a life, do the things you want to do, explore, have fun. Throw caution to the wind. 30 onwards, 30 to 60, is a classic spiritual path growth opportunity, whereby you turn the life traumas and the pain into positive understanding, positive development. You find out who you are. You realize that money, material things, is of no value at all. And you start to work to evolve and develop your own self spiritually. And I always say to young Andrew, of course, spiritual path is the most lonely path in the world, because you have to walk it on your own. No two people are walking the same spiritual path. It's your path. It's a path that you have to walk, and you have to understand, and you have to put time into. And sometimes, of course, on that path, you do go round in circles and you come back to the start again. But generally, as you're walking your spiritual path, you're having the opportunity to connect to spiritual people, to spiritual teachers, to use your intuition, to use your mind, to use your guides and your guidance from a spiritual perspective to make better decisions to move your life forward. And if you don't change anything in your life continually, then nothing changes. And of course, young Andrew, I think, did cover this earlier, that a spiritual person walking the spiritual path, developing themselves, will have continuous change. Your life should be continually changing. If you're finding that you do the same things every day, you eat the same food, you have the same thoughts, you watch the same things on the television, you have the same group of friends, you go to the same clubs. If you don't change anything in your life, then there's no change, and therefore nothing will change. A person on their spiritual path that's walking forward will have continual change, which generally, of course, can be quite uncomfortable, because we know that humans don't like change. It's uncomfortable. You don't like, if you walk into a public house or restaurant, where's the toilet? First question for most ladies, where's the toilet? Well, there's a toilet. We know there's a toilet in the establishment. We know it's there somewhere. We might not know where it is, but we don't need to be anxious and panic and worry where the toilet is. Is it left? Is it right? Is it up the stairs on the second floor? But most people, and I know a lot of you are smiling and laughing as I talk about this, most people have anxiety about where the toilet is. But you know there's a toilet in the establishment, so it's just a case of finding it. That's slightly uncomfortable. It's part of a spiritual development process. So next time you walk into somewhere, don't be worried about where the toilet might be. Just think to yourself, I know there's one here, and of course I will find it, because other people will be going to the toilet, so I don't need to be concerned, worried, or anxious. It's part of my spiritual development to be uncomfortable. So being uncomfortable is the indicator that you're developing spiritually moving forward. And this is what we do as your guides. Our job, as young Andrew has said many times, when you take this choice and you come into this life, our job is to guide you to make sure you have these key experiences of things that you want to have. Because when you take your last breath, I can assure you the first thing you do is knock on our door and say, how did I do? And the first thing we say is, well, we did give you lots of signs, but you continued to ignore them. Your intuition wasn't particularly good. Therefore, you didn't get to experience this, 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 and this. And you'll say, oh dear, what a shame. Well, what did I get to experience? And we'll say, well, you did go round in circles for most of your life. So the next conversation is, when can I go back and do it again? And that, of course, is a laughable part of the conversation, is that things that you don't get right in this life, especially key things, you will want to come back and do again. You might want to go back through some abusive relationship, connect with a narcissistic person that's going to treat you horridly, but you will learn a lot about the way that you've been treated. Give you the chance. Narcissistic people are here. They give you the opportunity to stand up. Stand up yourself. Don't be bullied. Stand tall. Push them back. Put the boundary in place. This is a responsibility conversation. So narcissism, even though narcissism is a type of personality trait to a certain degree, or you could say a disorder really, but narcissistic people do provide other people in their life opportunities to grow and develop, because you have to learn not to be manipulated, to push them back and to put your boundary in place. And all of you on this call, all of you that are listening to this in catch-up, will be laughing to yourself thinking, I always seem to attract a narcissist. Well, that's because you haven't learned how to deal with a narcissist, so you continually get the same experience. And your guides will be pulling these people into your life. So as one relationship ends, another narcissist is identified that's put in your path for another relationship. So you get to have it all over again with a slightly different personality, but someone that's going to treat you as badly as the last. So again, it's all about you learning and moving forward in a positive way. So certainly from our perspective, this is what happens before you come in. We sit down, we make the choices, we involve karma, we look at your families, your life choices, the key predominant experiences you're going to go through. And then it's our job as your guides to guide you in that way. So that really nicely concludes this part of the conversation at the exact time, of course, that the timer's going off, which of course was by no coincidence. So I will say good day to all. It's been my pleasure to hopefully lift the covers on things, drop the veil to a certain degree for you to understand your life, the things that are happening to you today, the experiences you're having, and what happens before you're born. So I will say good day, and I certainly will look forward to next week's conversation. Good day. Okay, so I'm back. And so what we got? Questions. Sorry, just taking a breath. I can't quite breathe, but I'm sure I'll be fine. Right, okay, so narcissistic people. So of course I've never got any idea what Jen's talked about. I just start to read the comments and notice Magdalena's talking about narcissism, which is always interesting. Okay, so Matsumi's saying a bit late today. I'll listen again. So you can listen on catch up, Matsumi, which is the whole point. We're very aware that, the times that we do these things, we have kind of increased the timeline to sort of 7 p.m. UK time, which makes it a bit later for you guys in the States. But we are aware that some people have actual real lives and jobs and things they need to do. So it's good for you to do the kind of core part of your life. And then obviously, because we make these available in catch up, you can then pick them up on the podcast platforms, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or obviously everything's there on YouTube as well to watch. And generally Facebook for a bit. So I think Facebook hold things now for a certain length of time and then seem to remove them. So everything is available. Hopefully you've enjoyed the chat. Joni's saying, I definitely don't want to incarnate again. That's quite a funny way to end the conversation, I think, really. I guess that is probably a lot of people's thought, Joni, really. So thank you for adding that comment. And Sarah's here as well, Earth Alchemy, to say, good subject to discuss. Thank you, Jen. Wonderful way to explain it. So hopefully it was a wonderful way, and I might get to listen to that probably tomorrow myself. Okay, folks, I'll say good day. That's 11:11 or 1 hour 11 minutes on my screen, so it seems appropriate. 111, which is a 3, which we know is a power number. So we'll say good day, and we'll catch you again next week. Bye, folks.